Hi everyone! Today we're talking about the combination between INFPs and different Enneagram types, and I will be focusing primarily on the three types that are most commonly found in INFPs, and those are 2, 4, and 9. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. So, before I get into more detail with respect to these combinations that I mentioned earlier, I just want to say that if you guys don't know already or haven't seen my previous videos or posts on this topic, I also offer coaching sessions, not necessarily focused on MBTI, but more general life and career coaching. In my sessions, I make use of different resources such as cognitive functions, Enneagram types, attachment styles, communication styles, and so on and so forth to support you in your self-awareness and self-growth journey. So if you are interested in that, check out the link in the description. It will redirect you to my website and you can find out more there about how to book a first session with me. So now that we have discussed that, we can focus on the different combinations between INFP and different Enneagram types. So as I was saying in my previous videos from this series where I talked about other types like ISTP, INFJ, ENTP, ENFP, and many more, technically, in theory, any MBTI and Enneagram combination is possible. At least as far as I know, there is no research pointing against it. However, some pairings are very, very unlikely, and it's very possible that it indicates a mistype. So for example, INFP and Enneagram 8 or INFP and even Enneagram 1 would not necessarily be very common ones, especially INFP and Enneagram 8. It's theoretically possible. I've heard of potential examples, but I don't particularly know the people, so I can't be sure whether that's really their type or not. However, the most common Enneagram pairings for INFP are 2, 4, and 9. So I'll go through all of these three. INFP Enneagram 4 is probably the most common pairing because oftentimes there seems to be a correlation between Enneagram 4 and introverted feeling. I'm not saying that Enneagram 4 is introverted feeling, because this is something a lot of people talk about, that we should not confuse cognitive functions for Enneagram types. I'm just saying that a certain mental predisposition for Enneagram 4 comes from the development of introverted feeling as a cognitive function. The way I like to see MBTI and Enneagram is that the MBTI type is stable and it's more nature than nurture. On the other hand, the Enneagram is more about nurture, is more about how our childhood experiences and relationships with our caregivers have impacted us. So basically, if someone is an INFP, so their perception of the world is biased by introverted feeling because this is their lead function or hero function, they will be more, let's say, predisposed to develop a certain Enneagram type. And the most common one is 4. Okay, so your typical INFP 4, as I said, the most likely combination, will be a person that will definitely highlight their introverted feeling a lot, and it will be less likely that a mistype will occur in this situation, because the 4 will make the INFP very much focused on introspection, self-discovery, understanding their values, understanding their emotions, connecting with their own subjective feelings and values. So this kind of person will tend to be more introverted, or at least one of the more introverted versions of the INFP, and will also show a tendency for wanting to be original and unique. Because this is something that Enneagram 4 considers to be very important. In their navigation of the world, they will very much focus on trying to understand who they really are and trying to project that image into the world. However, when going through a difficult time, they might have a tendency to focus way too much on that need to be different, on that need to be special, on that need to receive attention for their raw, original selves. Because Enneagram 4 often walks around thinking that everyone else is the same, everyone else is unoriginal and lacks authenticity. So in their perception, it's extremely important that they are different, that they are their raw selves. But of course, as it is the case with pretty much anything else, when you focus way too much on something, it's very likely that you're not using it or projecting it in a healthy way. And this, of course, can be heightened for the INFP4 because both introverted feeling and Enneagram 4 will kind of push the individual to discover who they are, to understand themselves, to live in accordance with their most intimate core values and moral systems and moral perception. Okay? Then we have INFP and Enneagram 2. This is an interesting one because, as I was mentioning in some of my previous videos on the Enneagram, number 2 is very common among FJ types: ENFJ, ESFJ, INFJ, and ISFJ. However, for INFP and other FP types, this pairing is still possible. So it's still possible that someone who has a high introverted feeling is an Enneagram 2. Not as likely as for FJ types, but nonetheless possible and often found as well. So INFP Enneagram 2 will often mistype as an FJ type. They might think they are INFJs, ENFJs, even ISFJs or ESFJs. And that's because they have a tendency to focus more on other people's needs and wanting to please them and wanting to help them and wanting to create their identity around the idea of being helpful, generous, kind, and considerate. And this might cause them to think that their lead process is extroverted feeling because of their willingness to make sure that other people are being pleased. But compared to FE dominant or auxiliary types, so FJ types, the INFP2 will still be much more likely to make decisions based on their own truth, based on their own subjective perception of their values. But they will be more likely than an INFP Enneagram 4 to want to please other people, to want to make sure that other people are happy and satisfied before themselves. And because Enneagram in itself is not always the healthiest tool, but like perception of ourselves, a rather average or unhealthy version of the two, regardless of whether it is in an INFP or in a different type, will make the INFP want to focus on the needs of others because they expect to get love back. So it's kind of a manipulative way to project oneself into the world. Of course, there is potential for growth and development like with any other type, but this seems to be a pattern that occurs, okay? And then, as I said, we also have INFP 9. In my opinion, 9 is probably one of the most widespread types because it's very likely to be found in a lot of different types: INTP, ISTP, INFP, ISFP, INFJ, even I would say INTJ sometimes. It's not a common one, but it's possible. A bit less likely in types that are both extroverted and thinkers, but it's still quite widely spread. So anyway, when it comes to the INFP Enneagram 9, this person will again tend to be more withdrawn because Enneagram 9, together with 4 and 5, are withdrawn types. So this means that this person will be more likely to interact the world by staying in the background, by being more passive in a way, rather than more compliant like an Enneagram 2 would be. So the INFP 9 will tend to be very conflict avoidant because for the 9, it is extremely important that inner and outer conflicts are avoided. They will navigate the world by trying to make everyone get along, by trying to stimulate collaboration, cooperation, positivity. Also 9, just as similarly to 2, is a positive outlook type. So this means that someone who has a preference for this Enneagram type will try to focus a lot on making sure that people get along, that people look at the bright side, and will have a heightened tendency to negate negative feelings, to negate things that are not really okay. And of course, an INFP 9 will have a stronger tendency compared to 2 and 4, but especially to 4, to negate possible negative experiences or feelings, and at some point explode, because of course bottling up all those negative feelings will not really be a helpful strategy long term. This will happen to the 2 as well, to a certain extent, but 2s are slightly more emotionally expressive as compared to the 9s. Whereas 4s are emotionally reactive types. So 4s in general, and of course INFP 4 as well, will have a stronger tendency to express their feelings and to want to see the same in other people. Whereas a 9, who's also an INFP, will be much more likely to stay away from that emotional expression, whether it is in themselves or in other people, and will want to promote an environment where everyone is happy and everyone is satisfied. But of course, sometimes this will kind of go against what they originally planned, because things don't really work out that way a lot of the times. So yeah, we can still find other Enneagram pairings, for example, INFP 6, INFP 5, INFP 7, but they are slightly more, let's say, rare as compared to the ones that I was discussing about. And then of course, INFP 1 and 3 and 8 are not really common. So yeah, I'm really curious if you are an INFP who's watching this video, or if you know other INFPs in your life, what is your or their Enneagram type? I'm curious to see what other pairings you have come up with or you have noticed. But anyway, as always, thanks a lot for watching this video. Thanks a lot for being with me. If you have any other questions about any INFP and Enneagram, please feel free to write them in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Thanks a lot, guys, and see you next week.